Today we're talking about how to start an LLC in Vermont, and what you can see on the screen behind me is a checklist that we're going to run through that is going to walk you through the entire process. And this is a Notion doc that is available for you. There's a link in the description below and it's free for you to use. But what we're looking at is a pretty simplified playlist here of content that we're going to be going through. And what I want to talk about first is the LLC dumpster fire that a lot of people end up in after watching online content. And the reason that they end up in this dumpster fire situation, and this is usually a year, 2 years out, is they're unfamiliar with what an LLC actually does. They don't know what piercing the corporate veil means or commingling funds, pass-through taxation. They're unsure of how to actually renew their LLC, and they're not aware of how affiliate marketing impacts them and how they get their LLC set up. And specifically what we'll be talking about that is if you should be using the state website, an LLC service online, or an attorney, and why affiliate marketers a lot of times steer people in the wrong direction. The reason that the algorithms many times start the fire is we end up in this situation here. So it's this person with just, they're maxed out, right? There's so many responsibilities, so little time, not enough time to do things, but you're doing the responsible thing and you're going to YouTube and you're searching how to start an LLC. But what you'll find with those results is typically they're around 8 to 10, maybe 12 minutes long, because that's about as much time as people are willing to give when it comes to educating themselves about how to set up their LLC. And what I have found is that's not enough time. So what we have here is this is a playlist. This is video 1, and there's 2 other videos in this series that are going to make sure that you understand all of these things that are right here. So if you're unfamiliar with any of these terms, they will become clear to you as we continue to progress through this series. First thing on the checklist is I just want to make you aware of that on this document that there is bonus material. So there is a glossary of terms at the bottom. If there are things being mentioned that maybe you're not familiar with, you can familiarize yourself down here. There's also bonuses that are available here for you. One of them is an AI chatbot. You can ask it questions like, how do I register an EIN? And they'll answer it for you. So there's just some cool features and bonuses there as well. First step is you need to decide which route you want to go. And there's the state website, there's the LLC Services, and there's an attorney. This is going to be a piece of content in and of itself, which is next in this series. But I just want to make mention of that depending on which route you go, it can help streamline this process for you. Of course, if you go with the state website, you're going to have to do the most work on your end, but there's pros and cons to which way you go with this. And we'll talk about that more in a few minutes. But with your checklist, the first thing you need to do really is decide on the business name for your LLC. The only thing I'll say here is don't put a ton of pressure on yourself. The LLC name does not have to be your business's brand name. The way that works is you may have an LLC name that's just your name, consulting LLC, or whatever it may be. But the brand name that you end up going with could be a fictitious name or a DBA, a doing business as, that lives underneath that LLC. That is the name that people will see out in the public. So don't stress out about having the perfect LLC name. And then once you do arrive at a name, you want to search availability of your business name. This resource link will take you here to the Vermont state database that is directly on the Vermont website, where you can search to see if your name is available. And if you find out that your name is available within the database, next you're going to get your LLC set up. The first step you want to consider is registering your LLC name. It's slightly different than actually filing your LLC. What I'll say it's like is like you want to get a website set up. So you go and you buy the domain name, so you secure that domain name. That's what it's like when you're registering the LLC name. It's a separate step if you want to go that route, because maybe you're not ready to file your LLC. But most people are going to do all these steps together at the same time. The articles of organization is just going to take in information about what the business is about. So what category is it in? Who are the members? It's just gathering basic information for the state. Next here, you can see filing your articles of organization with the state, and it requires a fee. As of making this video, it's $125 to file your articles of organization with Vermont, but that fee may go up in time. And later in this video, we'll be talking about a calculator resource, which helps you dial in exactly what the cost of your LLC are going to be specific to you in Vermont. Next, you want to assign a registered agent. If you're unfamiliar with what a registered agent is, this is a third party that handles important documentation and communication for your business. So let's say that you have a service of process, so you're being sued essentially. This person is going to make sure that you get the important documentation, that you're showing up to court on time and handling this process. So they're very important. And there are a few rules around the registered agent. Number 1 is it is required by all states to have a registered agent. Number 2 is that they must live live in your state of Vermont. And then number 3 is it can't be a P.O. box address. So somebody with an actual physical mailing address that lives in the state that'll handle important documentation and communication for you. The mistake I see here sometimes that people make is they'll end up like making it a friend down the road to save a few bucks. Not a good idea, because again, they dot the I's and cross the T's for your business to make sure that you're not missing out on important communication. Then the last step here is creating and signing an LLC operating agreement. One thing you should know is it's not necessarily required, but it's a very, very good idea to have an operating agreement in place when you get your LLC set up. What it'll do is it'll highlight who the members of the LLC are, what their roles and responsibilities are. But why it's so important is it's one of those situations where like an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Let's say that you did have a business partner and you end up splitting after 5 years. Well, how do you end up having that partner leave? What are their shares worth? These are things that can be highlighted in an operating agreement day one. So again, you don't have these massive problems that could result in a lot of litigation down the future. An operating agreement is always a good idea when getting your LLC set up. Now, in my opinion, you can do all these steps through the state website, but if you take a look at the state website, it's pretty rough. And maybe they improve it in the future, but typically all of these government websites are not as helpful as online legal services or attorneys that are more dialed in. And a good example of that is like assigning a registered agent. There's not going to be a recommended service for that on the state website. Another example is when it comes to renewing your LLC. In Vermont, you need to actually file an annual report, and it needs to be done between January 1st and April 1st. The state's not going to do a great job of notifying you that you need to do this with online legal tools and attorneys to make sure that you're following through with your maintenance that's required. Next, I want to talk about setting up an EIN. If you're unfamiliar, an EIN, employment identification number, is like a social security number for your business that is assigned to you by the IRS. You don't always need one day one, but a lot of businesses will, because if you have anybody on payroll, including yourself, then you're going to need an EIN. And by getting this set up right away, kind of like the operating agreement, you're checking that box so that you don't have to do this stuff in the future. And it's a good idea just to get it set up day one. You'll notice too that there's an IRS link here that'll take you directly to the IRS website if you want them to do this for you. Online legal tools will do this for you as well for an additional fee. But again, that's where the state website, they're not going to help you out with anything on the federal side, and they're not going to help you out with business permits and licenses as well. And they're also not going to help you out with our next subject here, which is obtain business permits and licenses for your LLC. Now, a good example of this is on the state website. They may be able to help you out a little bit on this, because let's say you're setting up a brewery and you're going to be serving alcohol. Of course, you're going to need a license and a permit to do this, right? Well, you may need this on the federal level, state level, and local level, and it can be a little bit time consuming on how to do this. What you can do is you can start Googling for each one of these things. I'd Google even your county and town. You can call your town clerk for information. You can call the county clerk, etc. But again, when you use online legal tools, which we'll get into in the next video, they can actually do this research for you and make sure that you have the proper licenses and permits. Not every business needs these, but you need to look into this after you get your LLC set up. And again, we'll talk about this in more detail when we get into the next video, setting up your LLC when you're looking at state online tools or attorneys. But what I want to talk about right now is very quickly what your LLC actually does for you. And we're going to be talking about limited liability protection and pass-through taxation. This is really important if you're not familiar with both of these terms. The easiest thing that I can explain on this with is like, let's say that you're starting a coffee shop, and without an LLC, you're this person in the middle. Your personal home, your car, your bank account are in the same bucket as your business, your point of sale, your business bank account, the espresso machine, the lighting. All of it is directly connected to you. But when you own an LLC that owns the coffee shop, it looks different. Suddenly, there's a division between your personal assets and the business assets. That red line that you can see in the middle is called the corporate veil. If you recall earlier in the video, we said a term piercing the corporate veil. Where that comes from is if you were to be sued, like somebody gets hurt at your coffee shop and they try to sue you, the attorney suing you is going to try to pierce the corporate veil. And basically what they're trying to do is find cracks in your LLC. Now, there can be various ways that you can have a crack in your LLC. One of them is a term called commingling funds. So perhaps day one, you were using your business or your personal bank account to buy things for the business. You didn't have a business bank account set up right away. That's commingling funds. It creates a crack in your LLC. They pierce the corporate veil, and then they're coming after all of your assets. So you can start to see why when you're setting up an LLC, it's good to understand what it does, but also know that you're not creating cracks in the foundation of your LLC as you're going through. Now, next, I want to just quickly talk about pass-through taxation. When you have an LLC set up, it is not a separate taxable entity. What happens is like in this case, you grossed $140,000 in your Acme Coffee LLC company. You had $90,000 of expenses and $50,000 of net income. That $50,000 of net income passes through to your personal tax return. So when the IRS is taxing you, it's not that they're taxing the LLC, they're taxing you, the individual. In the third video in this series, we're going to be talking about bonuses and talking about future tax savings, which doesn't apply today, but there are ways that you may be able to save taxes by changing into what's called an S-Corp designation. Again, I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but I want you to understand what pass-through taxation is. Quickly, I want to tease what's going to be in the next video here, specifically this decision matrix right here on if you should use a state website, an online LLC service, or talk to an attorney/CPA. And we're going to go line item by line item and talk about why you may want to consider talking to an attorney depending on your specific situation. So we'll catch you in that next video.